Hello everyone, welcome back. So I've got a reading update for you today. These are all GarbAugust reads. GarbAugust is of course an event created by Ollie from Criminology where every August we read trashy fiction, and I have read some trashy fiction this week. I read novelization of the movie Flatliners by Leonore Fleischer, and the novelization of the movie Mortal Kombat by Martin Delrio, and the thriller from the 1980s Deathmatch by Ralph Glendinning. And I've read a little bit more here and there. Read a few things to kind of uh, to kind of even out the trashiness. So we're going to start with Flatliners, and this was my favorite read of the week. This was really good. I thought it was really good. I mean, I don't know if it would be, I don't know if it's really good. Okay, I know that I really enjoyed it. I've seen the movie a couple of times before. The last time I saw it was about 5 years ago, something like that. I saw it when I was really young, though. And you got your cast there. And so Flatliners is about a medical student. It's about 5 medical students, actually. But one in particular, his name is Nelson. He's played by Kiefer Sutherland. And something happened to him when he was young, or he was involved in something when he was young that really, really affected his life and traumatized him and led him to ask questions about why people die and whether or not there's anything, after death, if there's a soul, if there's an afterlife. And so he has come up with an idea that he is going to, basically he's going to flatline. He's going to die. And he's, with the help of these other medical students, he is going to come back to life. And he's not just going to let his heartbeat stop, but he's going to let all of the electrical impulses in his body stop. So he will be technically completely dead. And some things start happening, and one by one, they all start to kind of compete. Well, Nelson died for a minute. I'll die for a minute and 40 seconds, and then 2 minutes and 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and on and on. And they start to have some really weird things happen in their lives that they can't deny are happening. And each of them has their own reasons to want to do this. Nelson kind of pushes them into it at first. For instance, you have David, which is Kevin Bacon's character. He is a complete skeptic. He doesn't believe there's anything after death. It just ends. And let's see, Joe, who is played by, which one of the Baldwins was that? William Baldwin over here. He just does it kind of because he doesn't want them to think he's a coward. And Rachel, what's her name? Julia Roberts, yes. Rachel has her reasons. Something happened when she was very young, and she has been obsessed with near-death experiences. And so this is an opportunity for her to speak to someone on the other side, if there is another side. And you have Randall, played by Oliver Platt, who always plays like the same character, really. I guess he was kind of typecast, but he always plays these kind of lighthearted, somewhat kind of goofy characters who have a very strong ethical core, right? You might remember he was in The West Wing. He played a character named Oliver something, but he was like the president's legal counsel during the, was it the third season, I think? Anyway, so I don't know why, but I really enjoyed this. It has the movie particularly, but the book also has this very, like, big city Chicago autumn gothic feel to it. And So Nelson dies and comes back. And he starts being terrorized by a little boy. And Nelson knows that this is impossible. And we learn why over the course of the book, and why this boy is very mad at Nelson. And David starts to be terrorized by a girl that he knew. And Joe is a sex fiend. He does some pretty creepy stuff. He likes to record the women he hooks up with without them knowing, and stuff like that. And basically, their sins start to, there's a lot of talk about like Prometheus and the punishment for stealing the fire from the gods and giving it to the humans, and things of that nature. And I can't remember exactly. I think Orpheus is mentioned. And so there is a very real sense that they have trespassed onto the territory of the gods, right? They are not supposed to die and come back to life. And they start to be terrorized by their sins, or what they perceive as their sins. And I just really enjoyed it. I flew through this thing in a day, well, really a night and a morning. It's not very long, and it reads really fast, and I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was really well written, and I think a lot of that has to do with how well written the screenplay was, and I also tend to think that Leonore Fleischer, I'm not sure, forgive me, probably was able to view this movie before she wrote this book, which I don't think is the case with the next book I'm going to talk about. Now, there's one thing that did interest me, which is, which is not mentioned in the movie and it's not mentioned in the book, which is that, a dream can take place in a very, very small period of time, right? So they could have imagined their afterlife experiences entirely in those few seconds between when they went to sleep and when they died, and then remembered them after they woke up. That's never really talked about, but it does leave us with the interesting thought of, well, perhaps there is an afterlife and what's happening to them really is supernatural, or perhaps there is not an afterlife and they are just being tormented by their own regrets, their own guilt, and they start to try to make amends for what they're doing, and some of them can't. And Randall, he doesn't die. He doesn't do it. He films it for them. He's also a medical student, but he's not brave enough to do it. He doesn't want to do it, and he thinks they're all lunatics. And I think that for a novelization of a movie, that can it stand on its own? I think this could have stood on its own, to be completely honest. Like, if the movie had never been made, if there wasn't a movie at all, I think this could have stood on its own. I think I would have wished for a little bit more depth, but we get quite a bit of it in this book. I was really impressed by this, and perhaps it's because I really didn't expect very much from it. But I really enjoyed this. So the next book I read was the novelization of the 1995 movie Mortal Kombat by Martin Delrio. And this was entertaining, but it was not particularly good. In contrast to the last book, Flatliners, I don't think that this one could stand on its own, honestly. So this is trashy in two ways, right? So not only is it a novelization of a movie, it's a novelization of a movie based on a video game. So all these characters come from the video game Mortal Kombat, and we follow in particular Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and Sonya Blade, and the god Raiden. And, there are two characters in this book that aren't really talked about in the movie very much, which is Jax and Art Lean. And they have a much bigger part in this book. And Goro, who is the four-armed half-dragon prince, has a much bigger part in this book and is a less brutish character than in the movie, and has a a like a sense of honor that is completely missing in the movie from what I remember. There's a picture of Goro. And I'm just guessing that that is probably because they were limited by what they could do with the Goro puppet at the time. I don't know if that's the correct term for that, but the special effects were limited. And so they probably didn't get to do what they wanted to do. But unlike Flatliners, there are stills. So there's Liu Kang and Johnny Cage and Raiden and, let's see, Shang Tsung. And there is Sonya Blade and Kano and Princess Kitana. And let's see, there is Sonya Blade again. I can never remember this actress's name. She was Veronica Vaughn in Billy Madison, but she was also in the 1999 version of House on Haunted Hill. And pretty awful things happened to her character in that movie. That was probably like the first horror movie I really ever sat through. I was like 9. I mean, I'd seen horror movies before, but like that was the first one that I remember actually sitting down and watching from end to end. It was because my grandpa's wife at the time dared me to do it, and that's a whole long story. She was his wife was younger than my mother. It's a long story. My grandpa's an interesting character for sure. So anyway, I'm guessing that maybe they sent Martin Del Rio the screenplay, and that the screenplay of the movie was vastly changed as they were filming, just because of the limitations, but also because I think some of the aspects with Jax and with Artlene are not really necessary to the plot. And, you know, for a book about fighting, there's not a whole lot of fighting in this. I mean, it doesn't last very long, I guess. It's a couple of paragraphs, and there are some really strange things like Johnny Cage, for instance, will know the name of the fighters, and he absolutely should not, because they're not even from his dimension, his realm. So I've kind of skipped over the plot of this. I'm sorry. So Sonya Blade is chasing Kano, who is in like an underground kingpin, like a drug dealer, a huge drug dealer. And Liu Kang has a brother. He grew up in this monastery, the Order of Light, I think. And Johnny Cage is an actor, but he's a fantastic martial artist. He was trained by one of the greatest, and so his movies showcase his martial arts skills. People think he's a fake, but Johnny Cage is the real deal, and he's arrogant because he's a movie star and everything. But he's still a good person at heart. And Liu Kang, he receives word that his brother, who was chosen to fight in this tournament, so Liu Kang knows. He was raised in this environment, talking about this tournament and the fight between the outworld and Earth, and this like 500-year ongoing series of tournaments that, in order for the Emperor and Outworld to get into Earth, for some reason there has to be 10 tournaments, and Outworld has to win 10 times in a row. And so this is the 10th Mortal Kombat, and if Earth loses, Outworld will take over Earth, right? All of these creatures will come to Earth and exploit it and use it and destroy it. And so anyway, Sonya Blade is chasing Kano, and Shang Tsung has a crush on Sonya Blade somehow, and he gets Kano to take her, to have her chase him onto this boat that goes into Outworld. And then they go to Outworld, to Shang Tsung's island, and that is where they have Mortal Kombat, and we meet Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Goro. And Goro is a very cultured character in this book, and very refined, and he has a sense of honor, and that is not the character in the movie at all. And so there are scenes in this book that are not in the movie, Um, the fight between Goro and Johnny Cage is quite different, for instance. And now some of it was very much like in the movie. The fight between Liu Kang and Reptile, for instance, is quite a bit like in the movie. The fight between Johnny Cage and Scorpion is very similar, and I'm pretty sure the fight between Liu Kang and Sub-Zero is the same. You have to forgive me. It's been about probably 7 or 8 years since I've seen that movie, and uh, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the characters. So when I was a kid, I bought a PlayStation 1 when I was like 5, and the first 3 games I got were Cool Borders 2, uh, Spyro 2, the second Spyro. I think it was called like, what was it called? I don't remember. It's been so long. Uh, and the third was Mortal Kombat 3. I believe it was Mortal Kombat 3. So, and I watched the Mortal Kombat movie quite a bit when I was younger, and it's still a fun movie. That scene with Johnny Cage and Goro is like iconic if you're of a certain age, and I liked it. It was not a great example of a novelization, I think, because, like I said, I think the script for the movie was changed substantially between what Martin Del Rio must have seen and what eventually wound up on film. But I did enjoy it. It wasn't impressive or anything like that. So the next book is Deathmatch by Ralph Glendinning. This is a thriller from 1985. It's about a man named Mac McGregor, and or actually, I think his name is well, his nickname is Mac, and that's what everybody calls him. And he has been retired from his job. He's 60 years old, and there's a new young president of this company who inherited it from his parents, and Mac is 60 years old, and he's a vice president, and he's been working hard all these years. And the president tells him, Mac, it's just your thing isn't working anymore. We've got these young bloods in with their computers, and Max just stands up and says, "Yes, sir," and that's how he is retired. And so that's very 80s. I'm sure that still happens to this day, but that that set this book off as very 80s. And his wife is very happy. She's thrilled that he is retired now, and she makes him go on vacation to Molokai in Hawaii. And they go to a resort where there aren't any phones or television or anything like that. It's just the beach and the jungle and uh, surfing and fishing and golfing and all that stuff. And some terrorists show up and take a bunch of hostages, and they're going to kill all the hostages if the U.S. government doesn't destroy an equal amount of nuclear weapons. And so, of course, Mac is 60 years old in 1985. He is a veteran of Tarawa, Okinawa, and the Korean War. He's a living legend with something like 40 some odd confirmed kills. And he and his wife are able to evade this terrorist squad because he looks out the window in the middle of the night and sees this happening. And when the guy comes in to take them with the hostages, Mac beats him to death with a golf driver. And it just starts off, Mac goes around and he takes the guy's, he's like the ski mask and the fatigues and everything. He takes his rifle and he hides his wife in a car because they're not going to be checking the cars. And yeah, that's where it starts to get kind of cringy because uh, only one or two of the terrorists are white. And so Mac has to pretend to be Puerto Rican for a while, and then he has to pretend to be black for a while. and he's coming from like this very, you know, upper middle class, like almost gated community, suburban kind of background, and that's very cringy. All of that was very cringy. And very cringy on the author's part. Some of the things that he was writing in this book, not just like Max um, being a fish out of water and being, having to do all this stuff, but the author made it cringy. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say, because almost all of the good guy characters in this are white Christians, and that's very clear. And not only that, they're like to the right of Ronald Reagan, and the Marines show up, and the colonel is like, my God, that's Mac McGregor. He's a living legend. I was with him in Korea. And, you know, it was okay, right? But Ralph Glendinning really puts his politics into the book, and that's okay. I don't really mind that. But there is a special kind of like 1980s conservative Republican with like khaki slacks and golfing a lot, and that is what Mac is, and that's what all the Marines are in this book. And the terrorists are, of course, like supposed to be trained Marxist by the KGB, and it's a Russian plot. We don't ever find out if that's the truth. Um, all the women in this book are described sexually, like every single one. That's pretty cringy the way that's done. And like Mac's wife is named Marge, and even though her character really doesn't merit it, like all the men in this book fawn over her and are like super impressed by her, but Ralph Glendinning really wasn't pulling that off with her character. Like I'd have been fine with that if he had made that believable, but it just wasn't believable. There's a hooker and her trick, and they start to fall in love in the middle of this. And there's a newlywed couple, and the uh, new husband can't hit the right spot with his wife, and so she purposefully seduces one of the terrorists just so she can uh yeah. And this is a weird book. It was really, for me, middle of the road. And I know I discussed politics. I don't usually discuss politics, and the politics really don't bother me in books. And it's just, this was so on the nose, like all the Marines are talking about how god awful the media is. The media is terrible, and they're the reason for all our problems. You get that a lot in these thrillers from this time period. And something else that really bothered me was that there is a journalist, but he's not really a journalist. He bought like a camera and a press pass and stuff in a pawn shop, and he's really sleazy and a coke addict, and he is also gay. And it feels very much like Ralph Glendinning did that on purpose to make a statement, right? And that was just not right. That wasn't right, and I didn't like that at all. It didn't sit right with me. It was completely unnecessary the way that he portrayed that character. Uh, and the ending was not. I don't think the ending really fit with the rest of the book, to be honest. So also, just to kind of balance things out, I have returned to Churchill's Their Finest Hour. I took a couple of month hiatus off of this because this is my book that I've been reading. It's a whole, I think there are 6 volumes, and I have been reading this whenever I get in a slump. And I was actually in a little bit of a slump at the beginning of this week after I finished last week's GarbAugust reads. Like I went through about 3 days or so where I just really was having a hard time picking up the next book. So I started reading this again. It's really good. I'm up to, uh, let's see, the second part of this volume, which is Alone. So after the fall of France, and this is Churchill is now talking about the situation in the Mediterranean and the Middle East in 1940, I believe. Yeah, 1940. And I've also been reading a little bit of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I've finished The Man with the Twisted Lip. Not in order. I'm not reading them in order, just. And The Man with the Twisted Lip is kind of an interesting story because it's about a young woman is walking home and she sees her husband in an upstairs window of this flop house, and he's kind of going, ah, and she thinks that some terrible crime has been committed, because when she goes up to find him, there's just like some rough characters up there. And so she gets Sherlock Holmes to help. And in the beginning, Watson is actually sitting at home with his wife, and a lady comes over in the middle of the night and says, I haven't seen my husband in 2 or 3 days, and he is an opium addict. So he frequents this opium den that is like the most violent place in all of London, and Watson goes to get him and bring him home. And while he's there, he sees an old man sitting in front of the fire, and it's Sherlock Holmes, and Holmes enlists Watson to go on this investigation. And Watson he's happy to be at home with his wife and everything, but Watson has an adventurous soul, and so he's like, yeah, I'll go with you, let's go. And it's them figuring out what happened to this young man. And I won't spoil it. It's just really good. All of Conan Doyle's stories are really good. All of them. The Sherlock Holmes stories, the kind of, he wrote a couple of horror stories. He wrote some more crime fiction, and it's all really good. Everything Conan Doyle wrote was pretty good. And what is it about Victorian London that is so cozy? Like, I mean, we know it was grimy and dirty and poverty-ridden and sooty, and it had these terrible fogs filled with like soot and ash and everything, and smog. But especially the way that Conan Doyle writes it, it is a very amazing, cozy place. And I mean, it must have been that way, It must have been a really fascinating place between everything that was going on, between the beauty and the filth and the abject poverty and the extreme wealth and everything going on, the trains and the horses and everything. So Conan Doyle evokes all that wonderfully. And so that is my GarbAugust reading update. And it's gone on a little bit longer than I wanted it to, and I apologize for that. But I'd love to hear your comments, love to hear your thoughts, and I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.